All right, so let's look at 5th grade, subclaim B. In 5th grade, what we see is a continuation of some of the geometry that we actually started in 3rd grade, as well as some other kind of new topical areas that show up. And the first one that I've shown you there as the example is the graphing on the coordinate plane. And I pulled this one out because it's one that is very fundamental to what kids are going to be doing in later grade levels, as well as it's pretty new content in 5th grade. One thing that you see there is that for all of the performance levels, we are limiting ourselves to graphing on the coordinate plane in the first quadrant. And this is a great example of where the standards for mathematical practice come into play. So it's not just solving problems by pointing out where things are on the graph. If I do that, I only have partial command of the content. And you see that levels 2 and 3 aren't any different in this case. To really get strong command of the content, I've got to interpret what those coordinate values mean. I've got to look at what does it mean in a situation. And an important thing to note here on the side is that we're starting not only to do geometry in this area, but also the operations and algebraic thinking standard. So that's that, connection being made among different topical areas in 5th grade. Other areas for subclaim B is understanding two-dimensional figures, in particular the hierarchy of two-dimensional figures based on properties. That's a huge geometry accomplishment for 5th grade, and it's important enough to be in subclaim B. Conversions within the same measurement system and using those to solve real-world problems. And what distinguishes kids being at level 3 from level 4 is one-step versus multi-step problems. Data displays, and it's very specific about fractions of a unit and what fractional parts of a unit are being used, halves, fourths, and eighths in particular. You want to look at properties of operations. That's a real different one for 5th grade that isn't happening in the previous grade levels, and that especially involves whether or not an operation property, whether or not a situation is actually a property of an operation and generalizable, or whether it's just a specific case. So that's subclaim B for 5th grade, so it's a little bit of a different flavor than what we've seen before. Now, I've gone through subclaim A and subclaim B. That's the major content. What you may want to do is hit pause on this presentation and take a look at your grade level for both of those subclaims and highlight some of the things that stick out to you as far as what it's going to take to aim for level 4 and 5 for our students. Are we doing that now? Do we have enough examples in their homework, for instance, where they're having to practice at levels 4 and 5, and so on and so forth? As you look at the rest of the presentation, then you'll see that the flavor, if you will, of the subclaims kind of changes. Subclaims A and B really focus on that mathematical content. You see some of the standards for mathematical process come into play, certainly, but where they really come to roost is here in subclaims C and D as well. So let's start with C. C, across the board, focuses on mathematical reasoning, constructing viable arguments, looking at the reasoning of others. Oh wow, how are we going to do that in an assessment setting? We'll think about some examples here. And then talking about precision when you make statements. Am I saying something that's true for only this case, or am I saying something that is true for many different cases, or a certain class of cases, those kind of pieces and parts. So let's look at a couple of specific examples. One thing you'll notice as you look through subclaim C's across the grade levels is you will see a lot of the verbiage is very similar within the table. And so, for instance, you're going to see a real emphasis on mathematical communication and constructing a complete written response based on understanding, on reasoning, on understanding of, for instance, in third grade, properties of operations. And the other thing you will see is that there is a lot of continuity and similarity and sameness, if you will, across the performance levels. And this actually sends a message that this mathematical communication and reasoning is important regardless of my performance level. What you'll see are small differences. For instance, I'm going to have, if I only have partial command, I will have an incomplete written response. But I still have to base that written response on certain things. So what you should do for subclaim C, particularly when you're in a setting where you're having students do extended tasks or an assessment where you have an open-ended task for students, is look at this subclaim C as one where you really want to be sure that this is what students are exhibiting their understanding of. Properties of operations in third grade is a huge one. So I'm looking for patterns in arithmetic. I am looking for, a logical approach, and so on and so forth. And what you also notice as you look through subclaim C is there's actually only about 3 areas where we're really looking for this reasoning, but they're big areas. The first one is listed here, properties of operations. The other one that's listed is called concrete reference, F-R-E-F-E-R-E-N-T-S, reference, and diagrams. And what that means is it's actually how much students use concrete diagrams, number lines, tools, and how much they use that to then create an efficient and logical solution method. And whether or not their steps are efficient, whether or not there's a defensible approach. Now, an important thing to notice, and I don't have it on this slide, but it's in the document, is that you can actually meet the standard, achieve at a level 3, and have some minor calculation errors. And what that does, I think, is values the student thinking as much as we value just getting to the right answer. The other piece then for third grade subclaim C that goes right along with that is this idea of distinguishing a correct explanation or reasoning from a reasoning that is flawed. And so what students might be is presented with someone else's reasoning, and they may have to decide whether or not it's flawed, and then present corrected reasoning. That is a very different approach to maybe how we've assessed our students in the past in third grade. And they really have to evaluate the validity of others' responses to their approaches. And an important point that's made, and this is actually going to cut across all 3 grade levels, not just third grade. This is not about procedure exclusively. This is about reasoning. So if we just do error analysis in third grade that involves, for instance, looking at someone else's steps and solving a problem, we're missing the point. We have to look at their reasoning. Why did they choose to do this process versus a different process, not just whether or not the process is correct. So this reasoning subclaim is in third grade is really focused on that idea of do they understand the properties, are they using the diagrams appropriately, as well as are they able to distinguish reasoning correct from flawed. Now I want to make one kind of technical note before we move to fourth grade. In the left hand side you will see, and this is true for subclaims C and D as well, you will see this reference to a third grade C1-1. Where you get that C from is by looking at the blueprints, and it tells you what kinds of limits and specifications there are going to be for problems. So as you sit down later and look at your curriculum for subclaim C, which is reasoning, you will definitely want to have that blueprints document alongside so you can see exactly what third graders are going to be asked to do. Fourth grade, you're going to see some repetition from third grade, where you see that the first subclaim C topical area is properties of operations. I am continuing that focus. Now, this is a great slide because it also shows you, similar to third grade, in fourth grade, I can have some minor calculation errors and still perform at a level 3, still meet the expectations, still pass the test, if you will. But I may or may not be truly ready for the next grade. So it's important as you look through this subclaim C that you look for that. But the other thing then in fourth grade subclaim C is a similar kind of approach to the reasoning, which again, the students are going to have to use those concrete reference to solve problems and how well they use those problems, and they're then going to have to distinguish from reasoning that's flawed versus unflawed. So there's a real kind of continuation from third to fourth grade with respect to the reasoning. So same topical areas, similar expectations.